Hello everyone. In this video, we will configure Azure Site to Site VPN. We will use Windows Routing and Remote Access Server to connect our home environment to Azure Virtual Network. If you want to know more about the Azure Site to Site VPN, then please do visit this URL. I'll bring the blog link in the comment section of this video. I have mentioned all the details that you need to know about the Site to Site VPN. I'll quickly walk through about the home lab. So I have VMware workstation setup where I have 4 virtual machines. These two client 1 and client 2 are the Windows 10 clients. I have two networks. One is 192.168.1.0 and other one is 192.168.10.0. Then we need to create virtual machines in Azure, then the gateway subnet, then virtual network gateway, local network gateway. So let's create all these components. I am logged into the Azure portal. So first thing we need to do is create the resource group. So let's create the resource group. I'll use name site to site VPN lab 01 and in the region we will use West Europe. Okay, our resource group is created. This resource group will host all the components that we are going to create for this lab. Now we need to create the virtual network. So let's create the virtual network. Resource group, the one which we have created, virtual network name. I'll go with VNet01. Region will be the same, West Europe. I'll skip the security features, go to IP address. We'll use 172.168.0.0 IP address range with /16 subnet so that we'll get 65,000 IP addresses. Here instead of default name, we will change the name. This is for our understanding that we assign this subnet to the virtual machine that we are going to create. Okay, virtual network is created. We have this address space. If we go to subnet, there should be one subnet. This is the one. Now let's deploy the virtual machine. We don't need any redundancy feature, so I'll choose no redundancy required. Security type will be standard. Image, we can use 2019 standard. Size, I'll go with the default one, which is 3.5 gig memory. That is enough for this lab. We'll give the username and password. We don't need any data disk for this virtual machine, so I'll go with only the operating system disk. Let's click next for the networking. Virtual network, this is the one we have created. Subnet VM-subnet01 is the one we wanted to assign to the virtual network. Public IP, we don't need a public IP because the aim is to access this virtual machine using its private IP address. So I'll choose none here. We don't need a public IP address. Next. Next, I'll click review and create. Okay, we have virtual machine deployed. This is our virtual machine. Now let's review the IP address settings. We don't have public IP address for this virtual machine. Only the private IP address is there. Now with this IP address, we won't be able to access this virtual machine over the internet because the private IP address is not accessible. So the only way is we need to deploy site to site VPN, and then we can access this virtual machine using its private IP address. As the next step, we need to deploy the gateway subnet. So let's go to the virtual network that we have created. Under the subnets, we need to deploy the gateway subnet. Now there are two ways to deploy the gateway subnet. One is either you can directly go with this option. This will create the gateway subnet. Otherwise, you can select this option and then choose the subnet type as subnet purpose as the gateway subnet. We'll click on subnet. Subnet purpose, instead of default, we can select virtual network gateway. It will take the default name as gateway subnet. Then I'll go with this default IP address range it has selected. Click add. Okay, gateway subnet is created. Now we need to deploy the virtual network gateway. Okay, we'll choose VNet GW01. Region will be West Europe. Gateway type is VPN. There are different SKUs available. Now this depends on the bandwidth you need for your VPN gateway. For this lab, I'll choose the basic one and I'll go with the generation 1. Here we need to select the virtual network. And if you see, this gateway subnet is grayed out and it has picked up the gateway subnet automatically. We need to create one public IP address. So this public IP address will be associated with this virtual network gateway. I don't need active setup, so we'll disable this option and then click create. Okay, we have submitted the deployment. Now this gateway creation will anyways take time of 30 to 45 minutes. I'll pause this video, and once the gateway is created, we'll come back. Okay, so virtual network gateway is deployed. Let's go and review the settings. So this is the public IP address of this virtual network gateway. We would need this public IP address to configure in the routing and remote access configuration. If we go to connections, there is nothing configured as of now. Okay, now we need to create a local network gateway. Okay, here it is asking IP address. Now this IP address will be the public IP address of our home network. Now to know the public IP address, I prefer this website. Okay, this is the public IP address of our home network. And here we need to specify the private IP address range. So 1.0 I'll specify here. We don't need to configure BGP. Let's create it. Okay, local network gateway is created. We can review the configurations from here. If we want to change the public IP address, then we can change it from here. If we want to specify additional private IP address range, then we can add it from here. Now in most cases, if the public IP address gets changed, then we need to update the public IP address every time whenever it gets changed. Now let's go to connections. Currently we don't have any connections. Now let's create one. Connections type will be site to site. Region will be same. Let's go to settings. Here we need to select the virtual network gateway, then the local network gateway, authentication method, shared key. This key we would need to configure in the routing and remote access server later. IKE protocol is the latest one I'll choose, which is IKEV version 2. Let's create it. Now, while it is creating the connection, let's configure the routing and remote access server. So I'll open the VMware workstation. So this is the VMware workstation. We have 4 virtual machines created. This one is the domain controller, this one is routing and remote access server, and these two are the Windows 10 clients. Now, as I mentioned, we have 2 networks here, so I'll first log into routing and remote access server. Okay, I'm logged into routing and remote access server. So this Ethernet 2 has the internet access, and Ethernet 3 is the private interface card, which is connected to the 192.168.10.0 subnet. So we need to first add the role. So let's add the role. Role name is remote access. We need to add routing. We start it if required. I'll choose this option. Okay, now here I'll close this wizard and let's open the routing and remote access console. Okay, we need to right click and configure. Now here we will choose secure connection between 2 private networks option. Demand dial connection, yes. IP address assignment will be automatic. It will start the services. Here we need to configure the interface, so I'll give the name as Azure Site to Site. Connect using VPN. Protocol, the one which we have selected during the local network gateway creation, which is IKV version 2. Here we need to enter the IP address. So this IP address will be the virtual network gateway's public IP address. Let's see what is the public IP address. We are not going to enter any credentials here because we have configured PS key there. Let's expand, go to network interfaces. This is the interface we recently created. Now let's configure the passkey. Under the security tab, here we need to enter the passkey. Okay, let's see if we can connect. Okay, the connection is showing connected. Let's review in the Azure portal. We need to go to local network gateway. Under the connections, it is still showing not connected. This may take some time to reflect. Okay, now the connection is showing connected. Let's see if we can access the virtual machine from routing and remote access server. First, I'll try to ping. Our virtual machine IP address, let's verify it once. 172.16.0.4. So ping is not working. We will check the RDP connection. This is also not working. So this is because we have not configured any static routes. So let's configure the static routes and check. So under IPv4, I'll expand static routes, right click and new static route. This is the interface. Now I'll give entire Azure virtual subnet here, which is /16. So subnet mask will be 255.255.0.0. Metric I'll give 15. Now let's try to connect one more time. Yeah, now it is asking for the credential. Yes, so now we are able to access the virtual machine using its private IP address. Now this virtual machine still will not be accessible from the other network. We can configure that also. So let's log into client 1 and see if that is able to connect. This is not able to connect currently because we need to configure NATing in the routing and remote access server. If you remember, we have two networks interfaces, Ethernet 2 and Ethernet 3. So we need to configure NATing. So I'll configure NATing on Ethernet 2. And then we'll configure in Ethernet 3 as well as a private interface. Now let's go back to client 01. Let's verify the internet access once. Okay, internet is there, but still the Azure virtual machine is not accessible. This is because we have specified only one IP address range in the local network gateway. This is the 10.0/24 IP address range. Let's go to local network gateway and see. Okay, as we can see, only 1.0 is allowed. We can enter 10.0 IP address range as well. Okay, we have additional IP address range added here. Now let's see if we can connect. Yeah, now it is asking for the credentials, so we are able to access this from both the IP addresses. Now the domain controller is in on-prem, and the Azure virtual machine, it is not in the domain. So if we want to join this Azure virtual machine to domain, we may have to adjust the DNS settings, and then we'll be able to join. So to adjust the DNS settings, we can go into the virtual network, then DNS servers, and then we can enter our DNS IP address. Then we need to run Okay, now the DNS change is reflecting. Now it is taking the on-premises domain controller as the DNS IP address. Now we'll be able to join this machine to domain. Let's try.